Hello and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I was frazzled right before we started the show, so I'm feeling it now, but we don't have a guest, so I have to talk more than usual, so it'll be great. But just so you know, I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
And they're as cool as cucumbers, unlike me. Note to self, don't go to the gym and run errands immediately before the show and then try to get back on time. But as I said, we don't have a guest today, so we're going to be answering kind of listener questions that have, I wouldn't say stacking up. We're not that popular, but there's been quite a few in there over the last couple months, and I solicited a few on Twitter yesterday too. So we've got a pretty broad range of topics, from category stuffing to pricing to book launches. So hopefully you'll get something useful out of it. And well, I guess we'll see how it goes. But before we jump into the questions, do you guys want to talk about any news you have going on?
As for me, I've finished and is in the hands of my primary editor, my fourth mystery. It's not science fiction or fantasy. And I've actually started my new epic fantasy, or it's essentially book 2 of the Pirates of Purrs series. So, and got the third one, I got the 2 of them plotted out and ready to rock and roll. So just gotta sit my butt down and write. And unfortunately, I've got a couple of weeks coming up where I'm not gonna get much writing done either, because next week I'm gonna be gone and my first cruise ever. So we're gonna see how well I handle being on a floating hotel. So I've been against it ever since, but my wife wanted to go, so I lost.
Cruises are good. I've been on a few. They're enjoyable. As for me, I am prepping New York Comic Con. Starts on Thursday. I will be there at least for the first few days. I'm not ruling out that I will be burnt out by Sunday, but I will be attending. I don't have a booth or anything, but I usually do like a meetup if there's any fans who are there, and I usually meet one or two.
Maybe I see too much Big Bang Theory, but do you dress up for these Comic Cons?
No, I mean, I may as well. Technically I'm wearing a uniform that I wear every year because I have like this strap for holding stuff, my convention strap. I'll show a picture of it one day. And but no, I haven't gotten a costume yet. I do have a costume. Oh, you know what? That's not true. I did go as a mad scientist one year because I have a lab coat and the other accoutrement for being a mad scientist. But aside from New York Comic Con, I am waiting on the cover for the Book of Deacon 5, which I think is going to be called The Crescents. Once that's done, it'll go up on pre-order. And I'm 60,000 words in another Book of Deacon story and 40,000 words in another Book of Deacon story. Originally, I was writing them side by side, but I found that one of them I was able to get a lot more words a lot more quickly. So strike while the iron is hot. I made that the main project, and I'll probably go through to completion before I go back to the other project. But that's where I am in my literary endeavors.
You're doing 2 books in the same series at the same time, where, like, for instance, one falls after the events of the first one you're writing, where it hasn't even been finished. Impressive. You get the salute.
Yeah, well, it's one of them is a sequel to a prequel, and the other one is just a regular sequel. Is it? Yes, that's the way it is.
A sequel to a prequel and a prequel to a sequel. Got it.
Yeah, gotcha. Exactly.
So are you working on those because is that still your most popular kind of core series that you're going back to?
Yeah, like overall, the Book of Deacon has been the biggest moneymaker. It's different for different stores, but on Amazon, Book of Deacon is the biggest, and therefore tends to be the biggest overall. And I would really like to get. I've never gone for release momentum before, with the exception of the trilogy, which was already written before I started publishing anything. So I'd like to get at least 2 books that I can drop 1 month in between. And if things go the way I'm hoping they will, then it'll be more like 3 or 4 books. But we'll see how quickly I go and when I feel like I can afford to start publishing them.
All right, cool. Yeah, we have a question about that if we get to it. I'm actually doing something similar. I just wrote a 6th book in my Ruby Lions Drake series that the editor has, and that's going to be the last one of those for a while. This one's a standalone rather than the original 5. Mostly I wrote it because They're fun, and they've been making pretty good money. All summer, those books have been doing pretty well. I think I hit the 90-day cliff on Amazon, in the last month or so, and definitely have noticed book one falling off now. It did stay in the top 1,000, 1,500 for quite a while, so I cannot complain at all on that. I think at one time I had all 5 of them in the top 2,000. So for me, writing in such a small niche, that's pretty good. But now, I've been wanting to get back to my fantasy and my stuff under my own name. I kind of sat down to do a 3rd book in my Chains of Honor series, which needs to be done because I left book 2 in a cliffhanger like 2 years ago. And I was just like having a hard time getting stoked about it. And then, of course, I had this shiny other idea over here. Why don't I do a new trilogy in my Dragon Blood world, which has been probably my most popular world to date. And because dragons, the other worlds don't have dragons, therefore they are inferior. So this is about 3 years after the old series with new hero and heroine, but bringing in some of the old characters. So hopefully people will, like old fans will enjoy it, but new fans will also, or new potential fans will be able to jump in without being confused. We'll see. I've tried to do that before. It's kind of hard when you've got like 8 books of back history and back character backstories and all that. But so that's what I'm working on right now. We'll see if it comes together with the cover art and everything to get the whole, I'd like to publish the whole trilogy. If not at once, like the first 2 books together and then book 3 on pre-order, having them all written before Christmas, hopefully to be a nice little income boost there. Since I haven't published anything under my name since May or April. So for some people, that's not a long time, but you will definitely see your sales fall off most likely if you don't publish anything for 6 months. And so hoping to jump back into that. And maybe for some similar reasons as Joe, I'm kind of going back to a world that already exists and that has shown potential to be a good, do well, rank well, and sell well. It is a challenge with the older series that I've kind of let go. I really need to go back and finish them, and I intend to. I'm hoping this will get me back in the mood for fantasy. But you kind of know what the earnings potential is if you already launched a series and it maybe only did okay or didn't do as well as you thought it might do. It's a little harder to get motivated for that kind of thing. All right, when am I opening up that world, Craig? I don't know. I suppose, it's kind of fun. I see Michael Anderle doing all these collaboration things, but at the same time, I would want to be a really big part of a collaboration rather than just saying, here's my world, run with it. But I don't know. It's something I'll consider in the future, especially if I'm able to keep publishing more stories in the world and they sell well. I feel really bad if somebody publishes this story and then my books aren't doing well, and therefore their books don't do well either. So it's tough. I don't like to feel that sort of pressure, which I felt with my Fallen Empire series a little bit, because there are people publishing it. That's a Kindle Worlds, and there's another launch coming up, and I haven't put out any new books, so they're not doing so hot right now. But I guess that's. Oh, Jeff, I did want to ask you about your news. Are you finding that the mysteries are doing quite well? You seem enthused to keep putting them out there.
I've gotten a lot of good reviews on them. It's just, I guess to me, I've been doing the fantasy for so long, it's just a nice, refreshing change. So right now I'm alternating between 1 book in the fantasy, 1 book in the mystery. And it's like when I'm wrapping up the mystery, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get back to the fantasy. Started work on the fantasy, and I was like, start getting some ideas for going for the next mystery. So even though I really shouldn't, because history has proven that I really can't multitask when it comes to writing, but I do have both notebooks next to me in case I think of something and I got to jot it down, or else, man, that thought is gone. So I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great to do that, or oh, I really should do this, and okay, back to the fantasy. And same thing when I'm working on the mystery, is like, oh, I should make that person do that. That'd be funny. And if I don't put it down or get out the voice recorder, I got the app on my phone for it, it's gone.
Yeah, I definitely have my note app on my phone that I'm always tapping little stuff into. And I feel the same way with fantasy and sci-fi. The kind of alternating keeps it fresh, or it makes it more fun to go back to after you've taken a break, maybe. I do think we sci-fi and fantasy people, we're pretty niche. No surprise there. And you do kind of wonder sometimes, oh, gee, if you wrote thrillers or mystery or something like anybody would read, would there be the potential to to do better? But I don't know. I don't really hear about a lot of indie authors killing it in the mystery genre, maybe because it's so well so many books come out in traditional publishing. I don't know if anybody knows any indies killing it. I'd love to hear about it, but I think for those two, there are definitely I do know more indies in that space, but I feel like there's a lot of them that come out, a lot of really big names. I don't know. You guys have any other thoughts on that, or shall we move on to the questions?
Bring on the questions. At least for me, anyways.
I agree.
All right. Excellent. First question is anonymous, not because it was originally anonymous, but because I lost the name. I just typed it in my phone's app, which can be handy in some cases. But anyway, it seems that some people stick their books into categories where they shouldn't be on Amazon, thus making it tough for authors with more niche books to rank in the categories they truly deserve to be in. Should you put your book in as many categories as you can, or should you be very exacting? Do you guys want to answer first?
Well, from personal experience, I've tried both ways to try and get it in as many as I can, and then it helped for a little bit, but for me that quickly tapered off, because if you put them as many as possible, especially like the big ones, like in my case, epic fantasy or whatnot, then there's a lot of them writing in that that genre there. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can just find one that kind of like where not many other people have been using and try and target that one. And I seem to do better when I actually try to find an exact genre where not many other people are in. So it's easier to find yourself essentially, and easier to rank and stay there.
The way I normally do things, in a lot of places, you only get to choose 2 genres. What I usually like to do is take the broadest one that applies. In my case, let's say for Book of Deacon, it would be just, epic fantasy. And then for the second one, try to choose the smallest one that I still fit in. So, for example, the newest Free Ranch has got an LGBT storyline to it, so I put that in sci-fi, LGBT sci-fi. I don't want to put it someplace it doesn't belong. I'm not gonna like take something that's on one page and make that a subgenre just because I feel like I'd be able to max out that subgenre. But yeah, so one broad and very accurate one, and then one narrower one that maybe I'll shoot for ranking on. But trying to get into a dozen different genres is something I don't really do. I often don't even really stack my keywords, which I understand is how Amazon will frequently put you into some of those subgenres. So I like to just do the 2 myself.
All right, I know exactly what the person is talking about, because it's always the romance books that you're looking in vampires, urban fantasy, or something that doesn't seem anywhere close to romance, and you'll see the bare-chested, blah, blah, blah. And I've done this with my Ruby books. She's in space opera, but they're very much space opera. So, and I don't know about the case with other authors, but you gotta, you get your 2 categories. So you're like, well, I'll do romance, sci-fi, and then I'm going to do science fiction, space opera, because that's really the only other thing that would fit. But I understand the frustration too, because in the sci-fi romance category, there's usually in the top 20, there's a couple authors with like 6 books each that sell a gazillion copies a day, and you're looking at them like, dude, maybe there's a kiss in there somewhere, but this is not sci-fi romance. So it goes both ways. I think a lot of the romance authors stick them wherever they can because their categories are so packed and it's hard. But I totally understand if you have a story all about genetic engineering and it's really core to the story, then you want to be in that category on Amazon. And then here's all these, cyborg, whatever, love, romance, naked chests, that it can be frustrating because you feel your story is a better fit. As far as what I do personally, I guess in the middle of the road. I want to be in as many categories as my books will fit in and make sense in. I definitely don't put them in categories where they don't. But I will take the 2 that Amazon gives me, and then I'll use the keywords. And I think we've talked about this before, but if you Google, I think it's just Amazon keywords browsing categories, I'm looking it up now, you'll get a list of what keyword to put in order to appear in a category that you can't necessarily pick from the KDP dashboard. For example, I think picking soldier, first you have to be in the broad category. You do have to pick like sci-fi, but then, or fantasy. If you wanted to get in military sci-fi, maybe putting sword or soldier, whatever the keyword is, into one of your 7 slots can get you in there. I don't know if it's still true. I heard at one point you could get into like 15 categories by putting more keywords into each slot with a comma between them. But I think when Amazon divided it into 7 slots instead of just 1, that they were trying to take that away. But it's frustrating when you feel your book deserves to rank and you can't because your category is too competitive and there are books that don't seem like a good fit in there. But it is what it is. People are not getting punished currently for doing this. Amazon allows you to choose. In some cases, it could be an accident. I noticed that I ended up in one time in like the romance military category because I had picked sword or something like that, thinking I wanted to be in sci-fi military, but it ended up in like contemporary romance military with seals and whatever. So some of those keywords can apply to more than one category. But do what you think is right for you, I guess, and try not to worry too much about what other people are doing. Everybody's probably dealing with this, so unless you're one of those lucky people that are just perennially in the top 500 on Amazon. I've never written a book that was like that just stayed there for months and months and months. It must be nice.
If someone figures it out, let us know, would you?
It has to be pretty broad appeal kind of book.
Yeah, don't be too surprised too, as I've noticed is there's one time I was kind of messing with the categories, the keywords, and I had never mentioned any possible mention of this, but all of a sudden, book popped up on the Christian list. I'm like, all right. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of swearing, not too much, but I have no idea what triggered that. I never used any sort of words that put it on that, but apparently, I don't know if someone suggested it. I don't know what their algorithms were doing that day, but hey, I saw a little surge in sales there. I just hope that I didn't get any negative reviews. I'm like, this isn't Christian base. What the heck? But well.
Yeah, I think Amazon is better now. I think early on they used to put you in some categories based on like words in your blurb on your title, because I know I had an early Emperor's Edge book, Conspiracy was the title. And it's all in a secondary world fantasy setting, but it got put in like political thrillers, conspiracy, and they didn't put it in fantasy. I was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? No, nobody's going to want to read this. All right, next question from Kuro. Kuro, how many downloads a day does a perma-free book typically get? How does it trend, usually for an author who hasn't published anything besides the perma-free book? He's not interested in the buy-through aspect of this kind of strategy, just the perma-free book itself. Does it stick? Does it have a drop-off? And when there's a drop-off, are there fluctuations in the trends? Are they curvy, cliffy, knobby, spiky, hilly? Or do they all flatten out like the Kansas prairie? You guys got all that?
Yeah, I'm looking at my notes on that too. I was like, wow, okay. As for me, I've seen my perma-free, when I say right now I fluctuate the perma-free titles, but I've seen it range anywhere from when I go to first, Amazon first, quote unquote, discovered that was free, and it like skyrocketed to the top of the list. I think at its peak, I had, I think it was Lost City, Tales on the Atari #1 was downloading probably close to 1,000 copies a day. I'm like, not bad. And as a result, of course, everything else just exploded in sales too. But it didn't stay that way for that long. But I eventually it got down to, I think, maybe like 100 downloads or so a day, and I still, thankfully, saw the sales going as a result of it. But that's when I noticed when it started getting really low. I'm like, okay, it's time to change things up a little bit. So that's why I started rotating the perma-free titles, and like Amazon rediscovers that it's perma-free again, and back up to the top of the list it goes. So that's what works for me.
Yeah, for me, I have 3 perma-free books, and I can't really say that there is a typical amount because, like my sci-fi, if I see 15 free downloads, about 15 free downloads a day, that seems to be where it gets. I don't know why it averages much lower than the others in free downloads. If I don't do any advertising at all, both my fantasy and my steampunk usually will level out around 50 free downloads a day. This is just on Amazon. I didn't run the numbers on the others, but figure the same over again because I make about 40% on an average month of my money from the other places. So let's assume 40% of the same downloads. So yeah, so I guess 40 or 50 a day is where they'll level out, and they will level out. Like they'll just sort of stick there for however long. And after I run an ad, or if they go off free and come back on, it'll jump up to about 1,000 a day, and then step down to around 300, and then step down until eventually it gets back to 50. So I guess 50 is the average for me without too much effort.
All right, you're doing better than I am. I went in and looked for the question, and for my 2 series starters, neither of these have been promoted in over a year for these. Bounced on the Blade's Edge got 787 free downloads on Amazon last month, and The Emperor's Edge Book 1 got a little over 1,200. And you like Joe said, you will get some probably, even without any kind of promotions or anything. It depends on the category. Blade's Edge is in steampunk. That's a pretty niche category. Emperor's Edge, I think, is in swords and sorcery and epic fantasy. It actually has the worst cover, so I don't know. I guess cover alone you get your free downloads. You used to get a lot more, as we've talked about on here before. There's some, Amazon kind of hid the free list. You have to click over to find them now. And for a lot of people, it seems that if they have Kindle Unlimited subscriptions, that's sort of replaced their need to look for free books. They just look for KU books instead. Big spike, yes, when you initially make it free, or if you run some promos. And the main reason I've left these first two free is just that it says they're free in so many places. And as I've talked about before, I think The Emperor's Edge is even on Scribd and some websites out there from like 5-7 years ago, that it would just be a pain to go hunt everything down and take it out. Yeah, it's on Wattpad too. So, depends on your subcategory. You will probably get some drive-by downloads, whether you do anything or not. The nice thing about having a perma-free or a book that's free for a while is it is pretty inexpensive to get a few ads for it every now and then. We've had people on that just kind of cycle through each month. They'll do an advertising campaign, maybe spend like $50 on just some of the smaller sponsorship sites, and maybe rack up a couple thousand extra downloads, which, it's not bad. I actually just did a BookBub promo a little over a month ago on my Fallen Empire 3-book trilogy for 99 cents. And, I made a decent number of sales and made my money back and all that, but I noticed it was way less of a, what do you call it, tail end after effect as when I did my Dragon Blood box set for free. Obviously, I got way more downloads for free through BookBub than I did sales, and it was a really significant boost in the buy-through for the rest of the series for a couple months after that. But that was not the question. You guys have any final thoughts on perma-free, spiky, hilly, knobbly, or cliffy?
Not from me, no.
Nope.
All right, we'll move on to the next question from Cadence. Can you cover self-publishing on Amazon in multiple countries? Also, I've heard that a couple of European countries where English is not the native language still has a market for books written in English because a large percentage of the population are bilingual. Have you had that experience? If not, do you think it would be worth a try? I was just going to say real quick that if you publish on Amazon.com, your book is automatically on all the Amazon stores in the other countries.
They say something like, once you do it, then like I think 12 or 24 hours, up to 48 hours, it will filter through all the way to all the other ones. The Canada store, the Australia store, the Germany store, the France store, and I've never once translated any of my books into a foreign language, but yet you see sales and downloads spike in various countries, which I can't explain it. I've got a big following in Germany, a decent one in Italy, and a really strong one in Australia. Is already English there, but a whole bunch of the other ones there. Just I can't explain it, but I'm not going to argue it. That's the power of Amazon.
Yeah, I know that, like, just on a general subject of publishing in different countries, while you do automatically go on sale on all of the Amazon storefronts, we've talked in the past about how different stores can tolerate different prices better. Like, you are allowed to price differently for every storefront, and like we've had people come on who say stuff like Australia and New Zealand can usually tolerate a higher book price because the paperbacks are so much more expensive there, and places like India typically won't pay more than pay the absolute minimum because things are so inexpensive there. But I will say that, I agree. Germany, especially for fantasy, Germany is an enormous market, even if it's not translated. If it is translated, it's an even more enormous market. But for a while, when I was at my absolute peak a few years ago, I was probably making $500 a month from just Germany, and I didn't have a translation at the time. So it's definitely worth. If somehow you ended up not publishing in other places, Germany, France, Italy, and Spain are like the big ones in terms of places you're likely to have. Well, really anywhere in Europe is going to have a reasonably high bilingual population.
Right. There are definitely people who are willing to read in English in those countries. And more than that, there's expats from the US, UK, Australia, all over the world. I'm always surprised sometimes where I get emails from, and people in the military too, stationed all over the world. So some of your readers that are just regular old from the city next door might be in Singapore right now. So yeah, you definitely want to make sure your book is available there. Like Joe said, Germany has been kind of my number one non-native English-speaking country for pretty much since the beginning. I'm looking at my stats from last month since I already had them up, and I sold as much in Germany as I did in Canada, where I believe they speak English. Just kidding, Mark Lefebvre, we know you speak English. But on the other hand, Mexico, I had absolutely nothing from last month. You know, I usually get a few pesos or something, but not last month. Spain, Italy, pretty small amounts. France, a couple hundred. Australia usually does pretty decently. I actually buck the trend of pricing higher down there. I usually swing lower. If they want like 526, I'll go like 499 or something. Like if that's what the conversion came up. It's their digital products, you know, they don't have to go over a sea to get somewhere. But, you know, it's totally up to you to experiment on pricing there.
Yeah, haven't we had several UK guests on the show that say specifically that it looks better in their stores? Like if you do the conversion, let's just say a $3.99 book turns out to be like 2.53 pounds over there, I'll deliberately lower it to like 249 or maybe a 199, but just something to make it look decent and not some obscure number.
We have had guests that say that, and I try to do that. I don't know how much that actually works because of the VAT tax they like to add on. I think when I've seen my books, like I'm like, I was careful to do $2.99, and then you find it in the store, and it's like, oh, it's $3.27. Okay, wonderful. But yeah, I'll try to do my best to, you know, Kobo lets you do that. Apple kind of does it automatically. I think that they try to go $0.99 wherever they are, so that's nice. All right. Nothing more on that. We'll move on to the next question. We're actually making good time, you guys. Maybe this show will be less than an hour. All right. They're nodding and smiling. All right. Next question was actually Antonio had asked this right at the end in the chat last week, and I didn't see it. We were kind of wrapping up. So he asked, why can a publishing company charge $9.99 for an ebook? The majority of readers won't know the difference. If the book is well written, well edited, why not price it around a traditional price? I think he's saying, why can't indies also publish at $9.99? You guys want to chime in first?
Well, you certainly can, but what I've learned with picking out a book there is if I haven't heard of the author and it's not a book that I'm actively searching for, if I see an unknown author, I'm going to instantly look at the price and I'm like, okay, that's a little much for someone I've never heard of, and I'm willing to go probably up to about the $5 range without any problems. Sounds good, looks good, give it a shot. But anything higher than that, I'm like, okay, it's got to have to be someone I'm actively heard of. Like, oh, he wrote another book, cool. Like I know that the guy that wrote The Martian, Andy Weir, I believe, wrote something else. I'm like, okay, that looks kind of good. I'm willing to pay the extra price. But if I come across something that maybe looks good, sounds good, but they will have like a $9.99 or a $10.99 price tag, I'm like, yeah, gonna have to pass on that because I just don't know if it's worth it. Not for an unknown.
Yeah, I agree. You can price that high. When I first published the first book of Deacon, before I had any sort of self-publishing savvy at all, I priced it at $9.99, and I sold one copy. The issue, in my personal opinion, pricing a book anywhere, an ebook anywhere near the paperback doesn't make sense to me because I know that the paperback costs a lot more to produce than the ebook does. So, like, yes, the market will support a $9.99 ebook, but I don't feel like it should be anywhere near the paperback price. So I usually don't go too high on a single book. I don't usually like to go more than $5. And there's also, you know, the reason that most indies price lower than most traditional publishers is, number one, we can and make more money than they do because we have higher royalties. And number two, when you price lower, you tend to have a market advantage. And that's something that particularly in the past, we absolutely needed. And it was one of the only things we could exploit at the time. So you can try pricing higher. And if people buy it, good for you. But I like to go $5 because I feel like that's a reasonable amount for an ebook, and still puts me in a bracket that's a little bit more budget conscious for people who might not trust just the name on the cover.
Right. That's kind of how indies have managed to break in, is that our books have been so much less or lower priced, so people have been willing to take a shot that are on a budget, like, oh, here's a whole novel for 99 cents or $2.99. And I think it's important to remember too that, from all I've heard, I'm not sitting in the meetings with these guys, but traditional publishers seem to be trying to protect their paperback and hardback industries. So, you see a new book come out and you're like, why is the ebook $14.99? Well, because they want you to spend $30 and get the hardback, because they make more money on it, I guess. They have, or they're set up. That's how their whole system works. And unlike them, they don't seem to be as concerned as we are about, I want to stay in a top 100 category on Amazon for more visibility. Maybe they have other ways to drive visibility, or there's a lot of times where I'll see traditionally published books that are $9.99 from a debut author, and you look at the ranking and you're like, this poor sod never had a chance. It doesn't have many reviews. It didn't sell. People weren't willing to do it. Maybe as Jeff said, that's just too much money for an ebook from an unknown author. So you can try it if you're in Kindle Unlimited. I know people have experimented with going higher, more like $7.99, because they want to make it look more attractive, and maybe there's some psychology to that. I don't know. I do know that in Kindle Unlimited, I'd still rather have a sale than a borrow. For most of my books, I'm going to make more, unless it's a 99-cent title, than on page reads, but I'm not doing 300,000 word epic fantasy anymore. No, mine was only 210, 220, something like that. So we have the advantage of being able to make a profit from a $2.99 book, whereas traditional publishing has so many more people they have to pay in the process that it can be less viable for them. Although even with these guys, we've seen them do more BookBub ads, and they usually go like $1.99 or $2.99 for a sale. So I'm sure they're very aware that dropping the price can improve the rankings and improve the visibility. All right, next question. This is from Anne. Do you have tips for marketing fiction which crosses two major genres? For example, romance plus thriller. All right.
Sorry, I had the darn thing muted. I'm like, where the heck's the mute button there? I can't necessarily answer this one because I haven't actually tried it yet. I mean, I would love to find a way to mix fantasy and mystery together, but I haven't come up with a way yet. So I know you guys have, so I will let you guys answer that one.
I would say, well, in the example given, romance plus thriller, that's good for you, because romance and thriller are two really good selling things. I would sort of default back to my earlier answer about just picking each of those as the two main genres, and whichever list you rank higher on, maybe do your promotion in that direction. In general, if you are, say, if it's like romance and sci-fi or romance and anything else, chances are romance is the thing you should be leaning on. I think maybe doing your promotion based upon the more popular of the two genres is probably the best way to make money off of it. But so yeah, I would that would be my advice, is look at which one is selling highest overall and cater your promotion to. So if it's sci-fi, romance, thriller, then romance is almost certainly selling more than thriller at the moment. Lean on the romance angle, but make it seem distinctive amongst romance by pointing out the thriller elements.
All right, my thoughts. I think there's a romantic suspense category to cover that specific example, but I think she was just using that as an example. But I would check and make sure. There may be a subgenre out there that's pretty close to what you're doing. As we're talking about with romance, they've kind of got subcategories now for almost all the different types of romances. So you may find that already, that there's an audience. I think with sci-fi and fantasy, it can be a challenge. I know my second book ever I published, Encrypted, started out very much as kind of a swords and sorcery epic fantasy feel in a steam age. But then as you get to the halfway point in the book, they've discovered this alien technology from like 40,000 years ago that was dropped down on the planet, and they're being chased by alien robot machines. So I remember thinking, I'm going to, plug this as science fantasy. That'll be excellent. And it's kind of a thing. If you hunt on Wikipedia, I think it has a category, but there's nothing on Amazon that's really that. And if there was, it would just be such a broad category that could encompass so much. I mean, what is it? Is it science fiction with mages, or is it fantasy with aliens? I mean, it's a pretty broad area, and it's tough with the cross-genre stuff because it doesn't fit in a tidy box, and it can make it a lot harder to market. Every now and then, you might get lucky and kind of hit on enough of the tropes of one of the genres to really appeal to those people. I think it's hard to straddle the fence and try to appeal to both genres. I would probably pick whichever one you're heaviest in and make the cover kind of fit into that genre, and the blurb and everything. And, go ahead and highlight the elements of the other thing. I love swords and sorcery, and if you have a little love story in there, let me know, because I enjoy that too. And you'll find that your readers are out there. You may just have to kind of, I wouldn't try to straddle it. I'd try to pick one or the other and make it look like it fits into that genre.
I will say there are certain genres that, like, you might think that you're cross-genre, but if you have any elements of one genre, congratulations, you're in that genre. It's not like absolutely the case, but I have found that if you get any sci-fi in your fantasy, you have now written a sci-fi. Like, sci-fi fantasy readers seem to be somewhat less enthusiastic about sci-fi elements in their stories than sci-fi readers with fantasy elements, as illustrated why Star Wars is a sci-fi movie with magic in it that is described with midichlorians. Like, it is fantasy and sci-fi, but go try to find that on any fantasy rack,
Oh, come on. When else have they mentioned midichlorians in any other Star Wars movie? Okay, we'll table that discussion for another time.
Let's start a brawl here, guys. Yeah, I thought that was just a toss in there to
stupid, excuse me.
4 movies after the fact. All right, but yes, you can find perfectly good examples out there of cross-genre things that have taken off, so it's certainly possible. I maintain that I think you should kind of pick a category, and then if it takes off, and then you can be like George R.R. Martin and put your fantasy and sci-fi, and I'm sure that's just the publishers and Amazon, but comedy, I think it was in at one point. Stick it in all the Amazon categories, like with our first question. All right, I will say steampunk is a weird category too, because I put my stuff in there because I have those elements, but it's actually a really narrow, people expect like this Victorian England world with steam stuff, and anywhere you get out of that, you might not be satisfying what the readers want. I don't know. All right. Next question is, Peter, I'm in the process of editing one of my books and have come to a scene where I killed one of my characters. Now, I write mysteries with a healthy dose of action and adventure. They're not cozy, but they're not homicidal rampages either, and I just don't like killing characters that I've gotten to know and like. If you have time, could you discuss your own first kills, how you felt about it, did you ever regret it, and of course, whether in true spy story style, killing your characters gets easier after the first one? And he says, bad guys don't count.
Well, I'd see. Me personally, I have not killed a main protagonist yet, but in my mystery series, my next one, I'm getting ready to. And am I going to feel sad about it? No. I'm actually kind of looking forward to it, and how I'm going to plot it all out and whatnot. But I mean, it happens. It keeps a reader entertained and intrigued, especially if you're like, okay, oh my God, this character's going to die. Why? What's happened? I can't wait to see who did it. That sort of thing. So, no, it lends itself to the story, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, there's a notable death within the Book of Deacon trilogy. There's actually more than one, and I'm not going to say who they are because maybe some people out there want to read this stuff. Spoiler alert, I suppose. And I have subsequently in other series killed off protagonists, and sometimes it's easier than others. I find that it hits me hardest when I wasn't planning it from the beginning. Like in the Book of Deacon trilogy, there's a whole prophecy thing, and we, the reader, are expecting this to come along from like the middle of the second book. But I've ended one of my sci-fi books with a character death that I literally had already written the ending without that death occurring. And once we got through the beta process, it was more or less agreed upon by me and one of my beta readers, like, no, this will work a lot better if that character dies. And I literally teared up when I was writing the scene. So I guess I haven't grown a scab over my emotional. I don't like pulling the trigger on characters even today.
You cold-blooded, inhumane author.
I know, right?
Yeah, my first one of published stuff was actually in Encrypted, which I talked about earlier, which was my second novel. And it was like Joe said, I didn't have it planned. I'm writing this character and like, gosh, this is a really sympathetic, he was a side character, but he was helping the heroes along the whole way. And he had a crush that was unrequited love. And so I think he really touched the readers, and me too. I was very sympathetic towards him. And then there was this moment I was just like, oh my gosh, if he sacrificed himself, this would just be like such a more powerful kind of final climactic scene. So I did it, and I had a tear in my eye. And I think that maybe if you don't get that tear in your eye, you don't get a little choked up about it, the reader won't either. I think that's kind of a sign that, oh, this is a character that you really liked, and it's hard. I don't kill characters often, but I do believe, I think Josh Whedon says this, that, if you don't ever kill anybody, then the stakes aren't as high. People don't, they always know when you're going into the final battle that your heroes are going to come out alive. So they're never as worried about it. Whereas if somebody died, maybe a main character could die. And so they're a little more concerned when they go into the final battle against the bad guys. And I totally believe that's true. I don't kill many of my characters, though, just because as a reader, I like to read stuff that's got some humor in it. That's the kind of stuff I reread that I really enjoy. And I find myself not rereading books very often if a main character died. Even if there's other main characters that I liked, it's dramatic and kind of heart-wrenching, and it becomes less of a fun romp and a fun reread for me than a story where everyone makes it. That doesn't mean I won't read your book if you killed somebody, but you might get a 1-star review. Killed my favorite character, 1 star. I don't know if it gets any easier. I like I was saying, I feel like if you're not kind of emotionally invested in it, then maybe there was no point in killing that character, like, because the character didn't mean enough to the reader, it didn't mean enough to you. I don't know, do you guys feel that you have to care about your characters in order for other people to care about them? I mean, they'd really become friends to me as I'm doing like an 8-book series or something.
I would think so, because if you actually care about the character, that actually translates into the writing, and then the readers can actually feel that. Where if you just can bring up a secondary character, you don't say too much about them, you don't really care about what they're doing, and the readers will pick up on that. So yeah, I was just mentioning in the chat in there that I was like, okay, because one person had asked, let's see, what did she say? Do you guys, where'd it go? Do you guys think that you might? Where'd it go here? The chat is really crazy here. It keeps on jumping up. There it goes. Kelveris, do you guys think certain genres restrict you from killing off characters? I'm like, I doubt it. You might anger some fans, but usually if the situation calls for it, so be it. And then I just literally wrote, I would imagine that if you kill off a protagonist or a main character, you better have a good reason to, because just as I typed that, I heard you, Lindsay, say, or else you're going to get a 1-star review for killing off your favorite character. I'm like, yep, that's exactly what's going to happen, because if you don't justify it there, you're going to piss off the readers.
Yeah, I got nasty emails. I did one in my main Emperor's Edge series near the end of the series. So he'd been in there at 6 books. He was a pretty main character. And boy, did I get email. There probably are 1-star reviews about killing him, but it was one of those, he'd been this mentor character for this other character, and I just felt, it just seems like somebody has to not make it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what our viewer Kay was talking about, because I won't read it because I might give like a plot point here or there, but yeah, I think she was talking about that very same part in your Emperor's Edge series there, because she's like glaring at one character, protecting another one. I'm like, yep, I know what she's talking about.
Yeah, and it, for the reasons I talked about, if nobody ever dies after 8 books and you're fighting the evil dragons at the end and everybody makes it, you're not afraid as a reader. You're like, oh, everybody's going to make it. I do think in cozy mysteries, I think maybe you're not supposed to kill people. In romances, obviously, you can't kill the hero or the heroine.
It's not one of the main characters, one of the side characters there, but it's going to call for it. It's not going to be a gruesome death, but yep, they're going to bite it. Mhm.
All right. So, shall we move on? Next question from Kyle. I think that you guys have talked about this in the past, but I was hoping that you three would do an episode focused on plotting process. Um, Maybe not an episode, but we can briefly talk about our processes. I've said this before. I don't feel qualified to teach writing. I'd have to like read some books and like take some lectures first. There's so many writing podcasts out there and lectures on YouTube. I've mentioned before, Brandon Sanderson has a whole series of lectures on YouTube. Check those out if you haven't. But do you guys want to kind of talk about how your process?
Me, I use notebooks just like these. I'll actually, jot down, like essentially real basic, real strong points that I know I'm going to cover. And I personally like to jot down, okay, well, each chapter is going to be roughly about this, and then I'll flesh out each chapter as I get to them as I'm writing. So I already pretty much know what's going to happen in the book just based on the chapters alone. But when I get to each chapter, I'll sit there and I'll probably put like 4 or 5 pages there. Okay, here's the goal of this particular chapter. And it's going to be this. Okay, sub goal you might introduce as other little secondary sideline type of thing here. Okay, scene opener is going to be this, and here are the points I want to cover, and I could just flush it out from there. So, but yeah, I've got to have that in place, or I have learned from experience. I am not a just see what I start writing and just to see where the story takes me sort of thing. I don't write that way. So I need very structured guidelines of what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, personally, I'll second Lindsay's opinion that I don't really feel like I should be teaching people how to write. There are
what the hell? I'll third it.
There is certainly like I have read lots of books and I know what I like, and but I haven't read a lot of books on how to write. So my stuff is fairly trial and error. That being said, I'll give it to Lindsay for the show notes. But I've been writing, keeping track of from beginning to end one whole book release on my website. It's called How I Write. So I'll link. I'll give her the link to the part where I talk about plotting. But for me, I've done it a bunch of different ways. But in terms of prep, it's always beginning, middle, end. I'll have the 3-act structure written down, and then I'll split the 3 acts into chapters, and then I'll write the whole thing. And when I'm done on the read through, on the revision pass, I will keep track of how much time we dwell on each character, and if I feel like there's been too much of this character, I'll intersperse other character threads, and if I feel like there hasn't been enough action, I'll find a way to dig some action up in a scene. And so I do most of my plotting as a very basic outline, and then as sort of a retroactive pacing.
All right. And in my case, early on, I definitely did a lot of workshops and kind of went to classes. And I'll still, like, if I'm at a convention and they have like I went to the RWA one a couple of years ago, and they had like a great lecture on kind of using Iron Man as an example for like these are all the parts, and I forget the guy who writes the screenplay on plotting. I know it's referenced often, but I enjoy kind of listening to the analyzing of it, but I find that when I write at this point, it's pretty intuitive for me, because I'll realize when I'm listening to a lecture or something, and I'm like, I pretty much do that for the most part. I kind of, build towards the climax, but I'll have like a peak and then a little bit of a character moment time in between all the action. And so I find that I do it at this point mostly without thinking. When I actually sit down and plot, I'm very chronological. That's how I outline, is like chapter 1, this happens, chapter 2, this happens. And I may put in some points, like if I'm trying to do a character growth, or something happens to the character and his outlook changes, I'll try to like make a little note in that chapter, though. This is where he realizes, oh my gosh, the big thing that he realizes, it's transforming him. But otherwise, I feel like I'm atypical, because I think very much in just a linear, get it down, and then I explore a little bit the character relationships and how people grow throughout the story. My one thing I will do with plotting that I try to keep in mind, because I see it in other books sometimes and it irks me, is when you've got a whole bunch of POV characters, I try to make sure each one has a character journey, has a motivation in the story, something they're trying to make happen. Because when they're just kind of along in the adventuring party, it can be kind of boring to read their sections. And so that's something I do try to do when I'm plotting. The fewer characters you have, the easier that is. Once you get into like 6 or 8 POV characters or something, then that's how these epic fantasies get so large, of course. Do you have any more thoughts on plotting before we move on?
I've pretty much covered it on my end.
Nope, that's all I got.
All right. So we're not Brennan Sanderson, just so you guys know. Go check out the lectures on YouTube. All right. I might just ask one. These are some old ones that Edward gave us a while ago that I've just been holding for when we had a show like this. Have any of you opted into Kobo Plus, and are you seeing any results from it, or do you know if anyone is seeing results?
My answer to that would be no, I have not.
Yeah, likewise. I'm through Smashwords right now. I haven't pursued anything direct through Kobo.
Ditto.
All right. Well, I've opted in ever since it became an option. I think probably this last spring or so. I haven't noticed anything from it. I'm not sure if you just go into the dashboard, if it actually shows you where you got some borrows. I feel like it's only in a couple countries, if I remember correctly, right now, and like the US and Canada aren't the countries. So since I'm with Kobo anyway, with most of my stuff, I'm wide. I had no problem opting in. I feel like we're still kind of waiting to see what comes of it. Always, happy to give new stuff a shot. And if somebody borrows something instead of buys it, it's on Amazon, it's a big deal. But on Kobo, I still don't make that much, so it's less of a big deal. All right, let me jump to Clara. How did you make, okay, this one's for me, I guess. How did you make relaunching the Ruby brand so successful? How important was it to put it in KU versus not being able to use free incentives? And so this was my pen name I launched a new series with in June after a year and a half since I'd written any other sci-fi romance with her, and only one other book in that time that was a fantasy romance that was just kind of a random one-off thing. And the mailing list was only about 600 or 700 people from the previous series I did with her. And I was kind of afraid to email them after almost a year without, oh, by the way, guys, buy my book. But I think with this one, it actually ended up doing better than any of the other books had done in the past, even though the first series, the Mandrake Company books, did pretty well. With this one, I talked about this a little bit before too. I can't write to trope or to market, but I was a little closer. I had the heroines originally kidnapped from Earth from our time, so maybe they were more relatable characters. I also caved in and did the bare naked man chest on the covers. They're awful. I mean, they're nice looking covers, but I always was like, no, I'll never do that. I usually did kind of tasteful couples in the first series, but I'm like, well, those sell. I'm going to give it a try, and it did seem to help. So I did launch the first book at 99 cents, and I had 2 and 3 come out pretty closely after the first book, which I do think that we've talked about before, that helps you get the momentum going. And I think a lot of it though is just some books are a little more closer to what the market wants than other books, and we can try to to figure it out. Chris Fox has his writing to market book, and you can just kind of see in your own category, like, oh, okay, alien kidnappings, those are what's popular. They're way more popular than more of the Firefly, distant galaxy, far future sci-fi romances. Which is a little more where my interests lie, and that's kind of what I go for usually. My kidnapped Earth girls didn't get to stay on Earth past the first chapter before they were off in another star system. So some of it's just kind of writing what the market is buying and what they're interested in, and some of it is making sure your covers are pretty good. Look at what's in your category, what kind of covers you see doing well, what are the books that they've been in the top 20 for that category for the last 3 months. I would definitely watch your category or categories before launch, so you can really get a feel of what's working. Don't just assume like, oh, I've read so much epic fantasy, I know what sells, what covers work on epic fantasy. I've seen the case where people will go on keyboards and say, oh, whoever, some really popular author, this is the cover that they had and it works for them, and this is the blurb they have that's 1,000 words long and sounds really boring, but it works for them. But you have to realize that they already have an automatic fan base because they've had 20 bestsellers. So what works for them may not work for you. Look more at the people that are kind of breaking out, maybe the other indie authors that are, like I said, kind of in that top 20 and sticking there for a while. Go look at their blurb. What are they doing? Look at their cover, and we don't want to copy other people, but you can see patterns after a while of kind of just surfing obsessively, I would say, through your category and seeing what people want. As far as how important was it to be in KU and not being able to use the free sentence, I do think in that category it's really important to be in KU. I see a few authors doing okay, making it in there, but I think if you went through the top 100, at least 80 of them would be in KU. It's still a huge advantage to have those borrows counting as sales and helping you stay in those top 100s. I keep hoping, I'm not a fan of it, I keep hoping that KU will be given its own kind of storefront, the way the top 100 free have their own store, top 100 paid have their own store. They could add another tab, top 100 borrowed, because I won't go on my rant, but I don't think a borrow is equal to a sale, so it should not count. But 99 cents works. I haven't yet done a free countdown or free deal. That'll be something I try to do. I usually wait a quarter or two till sales have kind of fallen off, and then I'll try to book some abs. All right. Do you guys have any thoughts on, if not my Ruby books, any recent book launches you've had?
Nothing for me, actually.
I have not nailed a launch recently, although my last couple of launches were pretty experimental. Well, the Calderon Problem did pretty well, but not any specific notable thing. I just did a long pre-order on non-Amazon, and I was able to book some promo with the iBooks people.
It is a little frustrating to realize you probably have to almost go in KU right now if you want to start a new series and really have it do well on Amazon. And in my case, Amazon remains like 90% of my income, even though I'm in all the other stores. I do sell there. I do fans in the other stores, and I make money there. So the trilogy I was talking about in the beginning, I'm sitting here wondering, am I going to go in KU or not? Because none of my Dragon Blood series is in KU. All my books are wide except for the most recent ones and the pen name ones. But it's sort of like I feel like you're shooting yourself in your foot right now if you don't jump in there at least for a couple of quarters. Alrighty, getting to the end of our questions here. Let's just do one more before the hour is up. Kind of going on the book launch strategy stuff. Ong asks, I heard you say I should wait until I have 3 books to publish. I almost have a 40K word novella, a 170K word novel, and 40K novella. So I guess 2 novellas and 1 novel, to start my 9-novel fantasy series. Should I have 3 novels finished prior to publishing? You guys want to go first?
Well, you've got, the way I see it, you got 3 titles you can actually work with. So no, I would just start advertising like crazy.
Yeah, I think I weighed in on Twitter on this one, but I feel like to a degree, having 3 titles available will give you some measure of the payoff of having a rapid release and having sell through and all that. It is probably better for them to be full titles, and at the very least, it's very important that you make it clear if they aren't full titles, like people expecting to get 3 full novels, or rather, people expecting a full novel to get a novella are going to rate you very poorly, and that'll hurt future sales.
Yeah, throw that word count in that blurb somewhere.
Yeah. But I think that 3 books of any sort is going to give you an element at all, an element of the success, but 3 full books is best.
Right. I think I disagreed a little with you on Twitter because I guess I've done novellas before, and even in a series with the core characters, I have found that not as many people will buy them. And I've seen other people kind of throw out a prequel novella, and they're kind of disappointed with the sales. I kind of feel right now that novellas are real helpful for like a mailing list bonus kind of thing. It is tough if you've got 40,000 word ones. That's a lot to give away, and your if your book one is 175,000 words, man, I understand not waiting until you have 3 of those before publishing anything. The world could end before then. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But my thought too is I actually wondered if, I didn't mention it on Twitter, but Twitter's kind of hard for having in-depth discussions, but I wondered if she could get 2 books out of the 175K book. I know people structure things differently, but I would feel less bad about doing a cliffhanger if I had the second book ready to publish at the same time, and if that one ended in a good place. It's just a thought. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I'm actually, with the trilogy I'm doing, I'm ending it way earlier than I thought, because I ended up with a whole novel. I think it's about 90,000 words right now, and I haven't gotten to the thing that I originally thought would be the end of book 1. So now the end of book 1 is this other big thing, and book 2 will cover the next thing. And don't you love being vague? But I probably wouldn't wait, honestly, till I had 3 huge novels. I don't think it's a bad idea, but it just takes a long time to write those and get it all polished up. The only good thing is that if you do wait, you can go back and change things in book 1 if you get to book 3 and you realize, like, oh, the religion or the magic system isn't quite what I wanted it to be. So there are some other merits to holding off if you can. And I don't know too, from the Twitter question, whether those 40,000 word novellas are prequels or kind of side things, or if it's like, this is book 0 prequel, and then there's book 1, and then it's 1.5. And don't do that. I've learned from my own mistake. I have a book 5.5. Amazon will not put it on the series page, will not list it as being part of the series. You cannot enter anywhere in there 5.5. I don't think you can put 0 in either, unless they've changed it recently. You got to do integers, and then it's hard if you have this short book in between. People expect these long ones. So it's, just going to depend. Maybe in your case, maybe write 2 novels and then launch things and see how you can use those novellas. There's nothing wrong with just charging $2.99 and having them out there for the fans of the series. I just think that it can be kind of awkward if you got a series of novellas where everything's the same, you're okay. If you have a novella, it gets a little complicated, because like I said, I found that people prefer the novels, I would say, in sci-fi and fantasy at least. All right, do you guys have any wrap up stuff?
I do have one final question after I asked me if there was anything from the chat. I'm like, no, there's not. And of course, there one pops up. Okay, Melanie Monroe asks, let's see, where to advertise if you are new and under 20 reviews? And to answer that own question from my own point of view, you can do the e-reader news is a good one. I think you could still go for a book blub ad. Yeah, it'd be expensive, and most people, when they're just starting out, if they have that low of reviews, more than likely they're not going to want to shell out that much money. But man, that's one place where you can do it.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've looked for new places. I've kind of just had my tried and true about 5 that I cycle through. Joe, have you got any? I know there are some lists out there. I will link to one. It's probably a couple years old now, but Carolyn Gockel at one point was maintaining a huge list of all the advertisers. A lot of them that's like $5, and they had, they would just not have the higher standards. Maybe you only have to have 5 reviews to get listed.
Yeah, I don't have a great list of advertisers. I happen to, I'm at a high enough level of the mid list that I will have new advertisers periodically contact me and ask if I want to advertise with them. So just about the only times I do new ads these days are when like, well, that sounds like it's a pretty legit service. Let's try that. I can second what Jeff said, that technically the official stance of BookBub is they don't actually have a minimum review requirement. That being said, it's very, very hard even with a lot of reviews. So, there's that. Also, we've had a couple people on talking about pay-per-click ads and stuff. When you're advertising on Facebook or the BookBub's ads, those don't have a minimum review requirements. So you can try that stuff even if you're new.
Just be careful. Make your ad for like $5 a day and see how that goes before.
Get at it first.
oh, $500 and spend it as quickly as you can. Yeah, that can definitely work. I feel like readers care less in general. There's some readers that want to see a book's got 1,000 reviews and it's the really popular thing at the time. But I find that if you write in the more niche genres, especially, that they accept that maybe they're only going to find 7 reviews on a really good steampunk romance book that's set in a secondary world with aliens. So, depending on where you are, maybe you don't need them necessarily, but you can always do a campaign too and try to get some more reviews. Sometimes if you just do like a free run, if you're on Amazon and KU, or if you're wide too, now you can just do it for like 7 days or something, and at the end you ask, I've said this before and it remains true. For me, if I actually ask for reviews, I get quite a few more than when I don't, which, and it's up to you if that makes you feel comfortable or not. I usually say something at the end, if you want to show your support, you've enjoyed this series, please leave reviews for this book. It really helps me out and helps other readers find the book. So
it really works. I did that, and my amount of reviews just skyrocketed. Usually, if they really like the book and you see something, I usually have like an author's note at the end that says, "Hey, what's next?" That sort of thing. And usually at the end of my author's note, I'll put something like, "Hey, if you enjoyed the book, hated it, doesn't matter. Just feel free to give me a review wherever you bought the book. I would appreciate it." People respond that way, so it works.
Right. If you don't ask them, they're probably not thinking about that, because I feel like it's human nature to mostly want to review something if it sucked. If you really had an unpleasant experience, that's how I am. You should see my Yelp thing. Nobody gets 5-star reviews. I'm like, oh, this restaurant was horrible. 1 star. Must be like the crabbiest person out there, because you just don't think of it. If you had a good experience, you're like, oh, good. I had a good experience. That's what I expected. And you move on to the next book or restaurant. And I guess on that note, we can wrap things up. Do you guys have anything going on that you want to plug before we go?
Just for me, I'm just getting ready to release mystery number 4. So, and I'm hard at work at fantasy number, lost count. Next fantasy.
563.
Yeah.
As for me, if you are a steampunk reader, then the Calderon Problem, the 4th book in my free run series, it just came out a couple of weeks ago. It's been out on Apple for a couple of weeks. It came out everywhere else somewhat more recently. Also, if you are a fantasy fan and you actually read my Book of Deacon stuff and are anxious for more, I'm writing a thing every alternate Sunday. I put up a chapter of something called The Adventures of Russell and Eddie, which I guess I'll give a link to that in the show notes too. It was basically, I was dared to write a story in which the main characters are a merman and a male fairy, because they never show up in fantasy. So that's what that is.
All right, cool. Well, send me those links and I'll plug them in there. I guess since it's been months and months since I released anything, I don't really have anything major to plug. So, but I will plug my new fantasy trilogy whenever I have it ready, and you guys can wait and see if I cave and put it into Kindle Unlimited for the launch or not.
Don't do it. Excuse me, Dusty. And I just...
All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. We are still most weeks recording on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, if you want to join us on YouTube in the chat. Or if you have any questions for the show, you can send them at marketingsff.com. We've got a little contact form that goes to me. Or on Twitter, I'm Goblin Writer. And Joe, what are you? J.R. Lallo?
JRLALLO.
All right, and Jeff's not on Twitter, so ignore
Absolutely
him.
not.
I think you can find him on Facebook somewhere.
Yeah.
We actually have a Facebook page, marketing. What's the name of our show? The Sci-Fi Fantasy Marketing Show. That's why we have
come on,
nobody
Lindsay. It's
Facebook.
not that late where we are. You realize that.
Well, but the URL, which to this day, I am mad that that is our URL. I got outvoted on that, and the person who outvoted me left the show after 4 episodes. I think that's the worst URL. I can never remember it. But
you do realize we can get a new domain name and just point the marketing SFF over to the new one.
That's horrible for SEO. Then you have all these broken links and you don't get all the credit.
I'm just saying it's possible.
All right, guys. On that note, if you're still listening, thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
All right, take it easy. See you guys in a couple weeks.
All right.
Enjoy your
So long,
cruise.
everybody.
Oh yeah.
Bye, guys.